All right, so today we're going to be diving into this 1956 Soviet fantasy film,
Sure.
Ilya Muromets,
All right.
or, as it was released in the U.S., The Sword and the Dragon.
Wow. Interesting.
We've got reviews, articles, we've got a study guide, FAQs.
Really?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack with this one.
It seems like it, yeah.
So basically, I mean, our mission here is to figure out why this movie is so interesting.
Okay.
It's got its roots in Russian folklore,
Huh.
groundbreaking special effects, especially for its time,
Yeah.
and the reception across different cultures has been really complex.
Interesting.
So, I mean, this movie was kind of a big deal when it came out. It was
Yep.
one of the first Soviet films in CinemaScope.
Wow.
4-track stereo sound, over 100,000 extras.
No kidding.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine
Elaborate.
wrangling that many people on set?
That's a logistical nightmare, probably.
And they filmed this during the Cold War, which adds
Another wrinkle.
a whole other layer to it.
Yeah, you have to think about the potential for propaganda and how that played into everything.
Absolutely.
Pushing those Soviet ideals, strength, patriotism.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely something to explore.
We'll get to that.
But first, let's just talk about the story itself.
Okay, so Ilya Muromets is a classic hero's journey.
Classic.
The main character, Ilya, starts off paralyzed.
Oh, wow.
He's in his village, and he yearns to be this defender of his homeland,
Yeah.
but, he's stuck.
Can't do much.
Then these wandering pilgrims show up,
Okay.
and they heal him
All right.
with this potion made from magic dewgrass, and they give him a legendary sword.
Of course. Gotta have the sword.
And boom, he becomes this epic warrior defending Kievan Rus's from the invading Tugars.
Now, when you say Keanu Reeves, are you talking about...
So it's this loose federation of East Slavic states.
Okay.
Um,
And the Tugars, who are they?
well, they're fictionalized, but they're supposed to represent the Mongols.
Oh, interesting, like a stand-in.
Yeah, this external threat to a unified Rus's,
I see.
and some scholars even draw parallels to the situation in Ukraine today.
Oh, wow, that's really interesting.
I know, right?
So it's not just a historical fantasy. There's some modern-day relevance there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So you've got your hero, you've got this threat.
Mhm.
What else is going on in the story?
Well, like any good fantasy epic, we've got fantastical elements.
Of course.
So we've got this wind demon.
A wind demon.
Yeah, he goes by Nightingale the Robber,
That's an intense name.
and he can kill people with his whistle.
Wow. So like a sonic weapon type of thing?
Yeah,
Oh,
basically,
interesting.
we've got a giant warrior who turns into a mountain when he dies.
What?
Yeah.
How does that even work?
It's movie magic.
Yeah.
And of course, we can't forget the dragon.
Gotta have a dragon.
This one's 3-headed, breathes fire.
3 heads.
3 heads, fire breathing.
That's intense.
Imagine that on the big screen in 1956.
I can't even imagine.
I bet people were blown away.
Oh, for sure.
So, one source described the forest where Ilya faces off against this wind demon as being littered with bones.
Oh, wow.
It's supposed to look like something out of a medieval painting, very stylistic.
Yeah, so it sounds like they really leaned into that dark, fantastical aesthetic.
Oh, definitely.
So we've got all this epic imagery,
Mm-hmm.
but what about the special effects themselves?
Oh, we got to talk about the special effects.
How did they pull that off in 1956?
Right. Well, sources are calling them amazing, groundbreaking.
Really?
Yeah, they're even comparing the director, Alexander Tushko,
Okay.
to Walt Disney.
Wow, that's high praise.
I know, right?
So he must have been doing something pretty special with those effects.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, he did come from a background in puppetry.
Oh, right.
So that 3-headed dragon,
Yeah.
it wasn't stop motion.
Yeah.
They built it to scale
A full-scale puppet.
and operated it as a puppet.
A puppet with a flamethrower in each head.
You're kidding me.
Can you imagine?
That's incredible. The ingenuity to pull that off back then.
Just amazing.
So they really put a lot of effort into these practical effects.
Oh, yeah. And you can tell.
You can feel it in the final product, I bet.
Absolutely.
But do you think they hold up today?
I mean, they might look a little dated to modern audiences. But I think there's a certain charm to it.
Yeah, I get that.
Like those old Ray Harryhausen films, you know?
With the stop-motion creatures.
Yeah, there's just a certain charm to those old school effects.
It's different kind of movie magic.
It really is. It's like you can see the hard work and ingenuity behind every scene.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got epic battles, fantastical creatures, groundbreaking effects for the time.
Mm-hmm.
But now, let's dive into the political side of things.
All right, let's get into it.
This is where it gets really interesting.
Tickle up, folks.
How much do you think the Cold War context actually influenced this film?
Yeah, that's a big question.
And how do we reconcile that influence with the artistic merit?
How do we separate those two things?
Exactly.
It's tough because you can't ignore the potential for propaganda, especially with that focus on, strength, patriotism, loyalty to the motherland.
It's all there.
Yeah, and one source even pointed out how the film portrays this idea of a united Russes
Right.
that encompasses modern-day Ukraine, Russia, and Belarus.
Oh, wow.
And they were suggesting that, we could view that in light of what's happening in Ukraine today.
That's a pretty heavy parallel.
It is, yeah.
There's that scene where Prince Vladimir offers Ilya a life of luxury at his court.
Oh, right.
But Ilya turns him down.
He does.
He says his duty is to the people, to defend the motherland.
Wow. Noble.
Very heroic.
Yeah.
But I wonder, is there also a message there about individual ambition versus duty to the state?
It's interesting, right? Because on one hand, you've got this individual hero.
Right.
But he's choosing to sacrifice his own desires for the good of the collective.
Exactly.
It definitely raises questions about how individual aspirations fit within that larger societal framework.
Yeah, and how that must have resonated with Soviet audiences back then.
Absolutely. It's giving us a glimpse into the mindset of that era.
It makes you think about the different ways a film can be interpreted,
It really does.
depending on who's watching it and when.
Where they are.
It reminds us that art is never created in a vacuum.
No. Now,
It's always a product of its time.
reflecting those values and anxieties of that era.
Okay, so we've talked about the Russian side of things.
The original context.
But Ilya Muromets had a pretty wild journey to American audiences.
Oh, really? How so?
Enter Roger Corman, the king of B-movies.
Roger Corman. All right, now we're talking.
He bought the rights to the film
Okay.
and re-edited it for American release
Interesting.
in 1960 as The Sword and the Dragon.
So a few years later,
Yeah.
he changed the title. Did he change anything else?
Oh, he didn't just change the title.
Oh.
He changed character names, added narration by Mike Wallace.
Wow. So he really Americanized it.
It's almost like a completely different film.
You've got to wonder what the motivation was behind those changes.
Right. Was it just for commercial appeal? Or was there something more going on?
Especially during the Cold War.
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking.
There was so much suspicion around anything Soviet.
Right.
So
Right.
maybe by streamlining this story, adding the American narration, and downplaying those Russian cultural elements,
Yeah.
he was trying to make the film more appealing, more palatable to American audiences.
It makes sense.
It became more of a straightforward action adventure,
Right.
stripping away that original context.
Almost like he created this whole new beast.
But it's the same creature at its core.
Exactly.
It's fascinating how a film can be transformed like that.
And speaking of transformations, we can't forget about the Mystery Science Theater 3000 treatment.
MST3K. They riffed on The Sword and the Dragon.
Back in 94.
Oh, man. That must have been hilarious.
What's funny is they thought the film was Finnish.
They did.
Yeah, which led to a whole bunch of jokes about Finland.
Oh, that's classic MST3K.
It just adds to the film's oddball charm.
For sure.
So it's this film that was born in the Soviet Union,
Right.
reimagined for American audiences, and then became this cult classic
Yeah.
thanks to a bunch of robots making fun of it.
What a journey.
It really makes you wonder, have you ever rewatched a childhood favorite
Oh, yeah.
and found it completely different as an adult?
All the time. Our perspectives change so much over time.
It's like seeing the film through a new lens.
Exactly. And that's kind of what we're doing here today.
Right.
Looking at Ilya Muromets through all these different lenses,
The historical
the
context,
cultural
the
influences.
different versions.
It's a lot to unpack.
It really is.
But that's what makes it so fascinating.
Absolutely. There's always more to uncover.
So where do we go from here? What's next in this deep dive?
Well, that's a great question, and we're going to get into all that in part 2.
Sounds good. I can't wait.
Me too. This is just the beginning.
I'm hooked.
Stay tuned.
All right. So we were talking about how seeing different versions of Ilya Muromets can change how we understand the movie.
Right.
But I think we should talk more about the cultural context behind it.
Okay.
This movie's based on these,
The Bylini.
the Bylini, these epic poems
Yeah.
that have been around in Russia forever.
Right. You mentioned Bylini earlier.
Yeah.
Can you remind us what they are
Sure.
for those of us who maybe aren't that familiar with Russian folklore?
Yeah. So think heroic knights, mythical creatures, grand adventures.
Okay.
That's basically what the Bylini are about.
Like,
They're basically the Russian version of Arthurian legends,
oh, okay.
or like Norse sagas.
I see.
And these stories were originally shared orally, so they're a big deal in Russian culture.
So it's more than just stories.
Yeah, they're woven into the fabric of the culture.
That's really interesting.
So you could say Ilya Muromets basically brings one of these epic poems to life.
On the big screen?
Yeah.
It's kind of cool how they did that.
And the movie really captures that larger-than-life quality of the bylining.
Like how?
Well, you know, those massive battle scenes, the fantastical creatures, that classic hero's journey.
Right.
It all feels very grand and epic, just like the source material.
It really does.
It seems like the filmmakers wanted to show off these iconic Russian stories and create a sense of national pride.
Yeah, you can definitely see that.
And this was during the Soviet era,
Right.
when political ideology was a big deal.
So we have to consider if there's any propaganda in the film.
Yeah, we talked earlier about how Ilya rejects that life of wealth and luxury.
Right, to serve his people.
Yeah.
And some people might see that as like promoting a Soviet ideal.
Yeah, putting the collective before individual ambition.
Right, so it's complicated.
Definitely.
How do we balance the artistic value of the film with the potential propaganda?
That's the million-dollar question.
Is there even an answer to that?
Well, it's not always black and white.
I mean, we can enjoy the movie for its artistry, the story, the cultural significance.
Well, of course.
But we can also acknowledge that it might have been shaped by the historical and political context.
You can hold both of those ideas in your head at the same time.
I guess so.
It's important to remember that even if the film was meant to promote those ideals, it's still a product of its time.
Right.
It reflects the values and anxieties of that era.
And that can be valuable to understand.
Even if we don't necessarily agree with those values today,
Right.
it's like looking at a historical document.
Yeah, I get that.
We don't have to agree with everything in it,
Mm-hmm.
but we can still learn from it and understand the past better.
And by doing that, we can engage with the film on a deeper level.
Exactly.
Not just as a piece of entertainment,
Right.
but also as a window into a specific time and place.
In a different culture.
It reminds us that art is never created in a vacuum.
It's always part of a larger conversation.
So far, we've mostly focused on the Russian and American interpretations of Ilya Muromets.
Yeah,
How was the film received in other parts of the world?
that's a good question.
Do we know?
I wish I had a good answer for you, but unfortunately the sources we have don't really cover that.
Oh.
But it makes you think, right, about how there are always multiple perspectives to consider.
Right.
You know, a film can be interpreted in so many ways.
Depending on the viewer's background and experiences,
Like
their
six-
cultural understanding.
Mhm.
So even though we're focusing on this one film,
Yeah.
it's really opening up a conversation about how cinema reaches different parts of the world.
And have different cultures engage with storytelling.
Right.
It highlights the power of film to go beyond borders.
And connect with people from all different backgrounds.
Exactly.
So we've covered the story, special effects, the context, the cultural significance, the different versions.
Yeah, we've really gone in depth.
What do you think is the most important takeaway from all of this?
I think the biggest thing to remember is that Ilya Muromets is more than just an old movie.
More than just a cheesy old movie, you mean?
Yeah, it's a complex and fascinating look into a specific time and culture.
Right. It's more than just entertainment.
Exactly.
It's a reminder that even a film that seems dated,
Can't be.
can't be.
Can have layers of meaning and cultural significance.
To like peeling back the layers of an onion.
I like that.
There's always more to discover.
And it's a good reminder to approach films with an open mind.
Yeah.
Be willing to look beyond the surface.
We can learn so much from engaging with art in a thoughtful way.
I completely agree.
And I think Ilya Muromets is a perfect example of that.
It encourages us to think critically about the stories we consume.
And how they reflect our world.
It's a film that challenges us.
To consider the connections between art, politics, culture, and history.
And those conversations can be just as fascinating as the film itself.
So it sounds like Ilya Muromets is a film with something for everyone.
It is. You can enjoy it just for the spectacle.
Or you can dig deeper into the historical and cultural side of things.
There's a lot to explore.
Which brings us to another point. We've talked about the original Russian version and the American re-edit,
Right.
but there's also the Mystery Science Theater 3000 version.
Oh, yeah, with the robot.
It's like each version offers a totally different experience.
It really does show how the film can be enjoyed in different ways.
So if someone's never seen it before, What version would you recommend?
Oh, that's tough.
Yeah.
If you want the authentic experience,
Yeah.
go with the original Russian version.
Okay.
It's visually stunning, and it gives you a real feel for the cultural context.
But if you're looking for something a little more fun and lighthearted,
Yeah,
the MST3K version is great.
they make fun of it, but they also appreciate its charm.
So, no matter which version you choose,
You're in for a unique experience.
what do you think it is about this film that continues to resonate with people?
Even decades later.
Yeah, why are people still talking about it?
Well, for one, it has those universal themes of heroism, sacrifice, good versus evil.
Those themes are timeless.
Yeah, they speak to something deep within us.
And I think Ilya Muromets, with its epic scale and fantasy elements, brings those themes to life in a really interesting way,
It's a film that lets us escape into a world of myth and legend.
where heroes fight monsters and good always wins.
Yeah, and I think we all crave that kind of escapism sometimes.
Especially nowadays.
Exactly, when the world feels chaotic.
It's comforting to see those lines between good and evil so clearly defined.
And to see heroism rewarded.
Ilya Muromets provides that comfort and reassurance,
It reminds us that courage and determination can prevail.
even when things are tough.
Exactly. And that message is still relevant today
That's why Ilya Muromets keeps finding new audiences.
and inspiring new conversations.
Okay, so as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, what do you think is the ultimate message of the film?
What is it trying to say about us?
Yeah, what does it all mean?
That's a great question.
I know, right?
And I don't think there's one right answer.
Of course.
But if I had to guess, I'd say Ilya Muromets is a story about the power of belief.
The power of belief.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Think about it. Ilya starts as this paralyzed man,
He can't do anything.
but he never gives up hope.
Okay.
He believes in himself, his destiny, the good of humanity.
And that gives him the strength to become a hero.
Exactly.
I never thought about it that way.
It makes you think about how belief shows up in our own lives.
Yeah, it's not always about religion.
It can be about believing in ourselves, our dreams, our ability to make a difference.
Right.
Ilya Muromets reminds us that even a small amount of belief can lead to amazing things,
That's a powerful message.
and one we should all remember.
So, as we continue our deep dive,
Yeah,
we should keep that message in mind.
because even with the battles, the creatures, the Cold War stuff,
There's a heart to this film,
that speaks to what it means to be human.
and that's what makes Ilya Muromets a timeless and enduring piece of cinema.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well said. And that's a perfect place to take a break.
Okay.
We'll be back in part 3 to talk about.
What makes this film stand out in cinematic history?
Stay tuned. All right, so we've talked about, like, a lot. Russian folklore, Cold War stuff, those interesting special effects.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
But I kind of want to zoom out for a sec
Okay.
and talk about Ilya Muromets as, like, a piece of cinema history.
Right.
What makes this film stand out, especially for when it was made?
Well, I think you got to start with the sheer scale of it.
Right.
I mean, this was groundbreaking for Soviet cinema.
Yeah.
Remember all his extras?
Oh, yeah.
Over 100,000?
Yeah.
And 10,000 horses.
It's crazy.
Those elaborate sets, the practical effects,
It's a huge project.
absolute massive undertaking.
Yeah.
It really pushed the boundaries of what you could do in filmmaking.
Especially back then.
Yeah, and they were also one of the first Soviet films to use CinemaScope.
Right, that widescreen format.
It really drew audiences into the story.
It's like they were trying to create this immersive experience.
Yeah, like you're right there in the world of the film.
Hmm.
And this was before TVs were everywhere. So going to the movies was like a big event.
So people wanted to be entertained.
They wanted to escape into these other worlds.
And Ilya Muromets gave them that.
It definitely delivered on that front.
They were ahead of their time
I think so.
with their cinematic vision.
Yeah,
It makes you wonder what people back then thought of it.
right. Did it blow their minds?
Yeah.
Well, it looks like the movie was a huge hit in the Soviet Union.
Really?
People loved it.
Makes sense.
They praised the visuals, the story, those patriotic themes,
It had it all.
action, adventure, romance, mythology, and a bit of national pride sprinkled in.
It must have been a real crowd pleaser.
Oh yeah, a real spectacle.
But how do you think it was received in other parts of the world?
Especially during the Cold War.
Yeah, I bet that had an impact.
For Western audiences, it must have been this glimpse into Soviet culture and their filmmaking.
But also viewed through that lens of political ideology.
It's hard to separate the two.
Yeah.
But even with that, the film's technical achievements and the visual storytelling,
They stood out.
They shone through, absolutely.
It shows how powerful movies can be.
In terms of crossing cultural and political boundaries,
It's interesting how this movie from the Soviet Union,
which was often seen as the other during the Cold War,
right?
was able to find an audience in the West.
Yeah, it tells us that some stories and themes are just universal.
No matter where they come from.
And we can't forget about that American re-edit.
Right, the sword and the dragon.
It's like Ilya Muromets lived two different lives.
It's wild how both versions were successful.
It shows that a film can be experienced in so many different ways.
There's no one right way to watch it.
Depends on the context, the audience, how you're looking at it.
Like a chameleon, it adapts.
But it always keeps its core essence.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if the director,
Dushko.
if he ever imagined that his film would have this long and crazy journey.
It's fascinating. I bet he'd be amazed by how Ilya Muromets has been embraced, reinterpreted, and even made fun of over the years.
Yeah, the MST3K version.
It's proof that the movie still has power.
It sparks conversation.
And debate.
It reminds us that art isn't static.
It keeps evolving.
Finding new meaning.
Ilya Muromets is a great example of that.
With its mix of folklore, spectacle, history.
It's a unique blend.
So, as we're wrapping up this deep dive into Ilya Muromets,
what do you hope people take away from all this?
well, I hope they'll want to check out the film.
Yeah.
Any version, whichever one sounds interesting to them.
I think they'll be surprised by how visually stunning it is.
And the story, the themes.
It makes you think.
Maybe it'll even get them interested in other films from different cultures.
From different times.
Ilya Muromets is a film that deserves more attention.
It's got its quirks.
We've flaws.
But it's undeniably charming.
It reminds us that cinema can take us to other places.
Challenge how we see things.
And help us understand the human experience better.
Well said.
It all comes back to the power of storytelling.
To connect with us across cultures and time.
So, to everyone listening,
take your own deep dive into the world of Ilya Muromets.
You might be surprised by what you find.
And who knows, maybe it'll inspire you to go on your own cinematic adventure.
Explore movies from all over the world.
And find those hidden gems.
That's what it's all about.
Keep exploring, keep questioning.
And keep diving deep into the world of film.
Until next time.
See you then.